Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you to Tata Literature Live 2022 in association with the NCPA, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Titan, powered by Godrej and Kotak. This session is sponsored by Kotak. This year, your favorite International Literature Festival takes on a combined format, both online and, thank God, finally offline. We have had 2 days of the online edit yesterday and today. And then those in and around Mumbai, remember you can join us for the physical version of the festival on ground at NCPA tomorrow. That is Friday, the 11th of November. And then additionally at St. Paul's Institute of Communication Education and Tidal Waves Bookstore, as well as NCPA on Saturday and Sunday. So do check out our website, tatalitlive.in, for the full schedule of list of speakers and the sessions. I look forward to seeing you all there. Now, on to our second online session for today, Eyes on You. Dave Eggers' new novel, The Every, isn't just an emphatic satire of monopoly power. The book's sales plan is itself a performance piece, an act of resistance against big tech hegemony. In short, you can't buy a hardcover edition of The Every from Amazon, ever. Dave is an advocate for using technology and not being used by it. And that brings us to today's discussion of big tech and the loss of human agency. Writing is only his day job. Dave Eggers moonlights as a publisher, a philanthropist, and advocate for students and teachers whose breakout memoir, a heartbreaking work of staggering genius in 2000, was followed by other fiction and nonfiction successes. He is the founder of McSweeney's, an independent publishing company based in San Francisco that produces books, a humor website, The Believer magazine, Illustoria magazine, and a journal of new writing. He is the winner of the Muhammad Ali Humanitarian Award for Education, the Dayton Literary Peace Prize, and the TED Prize, amongst a host of others. Time magazine says of him, many writers, having written a first bestseller, might see it as a nice way to start a career. He started a movement instead. Please welcome Mr. Dave Eggers. He will be in conversation with Malavika Jayaram. She is the inaugural executive director of Digital Asia Hub, a Hong Kong-based independent research think tank incubated by the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, where she's also a faculty associate. A technology lawyer for over 15 years and voted one of India's leading lawyers, Malavika is an associate fellow with Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, as part of its Asia Pacific program, and is also a member of the high-level expert advisory group to the OECD project, Going Digital. Remember, you can contribute your questions for the Q&A that will happen at the end of this session. Write in your questions into the comment boxes of the platform that you're viewing us on at any time through the session. And remember, you can write in your name as well. Now, we have our eyes on you, Mr. Eggers and Mrs. Jayaram. Let's talk big tech.
Thank you. Hi, Dave. So good to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for doing this so late.
Not a problem. I think watching you navigate Zoom setting is something I'm quite excited to have seen. I'm not sure many people have seen that side of you, despite all of your writing.
Viewers don't know that this has taken us 45 minutes to get this going. We've had every problem conceivable on my end. I don't know. I'm still pretty new to this software, and I feel like it has always been unreliable on my end, and it's, I'm sure, human error. But anyway, thank you for your patience.
Not at all. So before anything else happens with the interwebs, maybe we should get straight into it. Someone's not helping with the series of tubes. I guess my very first question to you is, having read The Circle and The Every and pretty much everything you've done, what triggered this interest in privacy, surveillance, tech monopolies? Like, where was there a particular germ of where that sprung from, this interest?
Yeah, I think I'm from Chicago originally, but I moved to San Francisco right after college, and that was in 1992 when the web was very young, and I sort of got to know a lot of people, that were very influential in the tech world in that time, including all the people behind Wired magazine. We shared office space in San Francisco way back when, and so I was always a little bit of a skeptic, even though I was an early adopter of the Apple computer and used it for desktop publishing and still do, and value the way that Apple bridged the divide between those of us that aren't good at math and those that are. They made computing and computers and all of that technology accessible to the liberal arts and visual arts majors. So I was always a little bit of a skeptic about some of the claims and maybe hubris of the tech world, but I was also always a user of this technology and really valued the democratizing power of it, because it made publishing possible for a tiny group of people, for my little company, McSweeney's. And but I think the thing that first triggered it with the circle was I got very uncomfortable with the consolidation of wealth and power that had happened. By the end of the 20th century, we really did have a handful of monopolies. And now in this century, they've consolidated further. We really do have like 5 giant monopolies that control much of what we have access to. And that was not the point of the internet. Some of the idealistic, utopian, post-hippie kind of generation that invented the internet, they did not want or foresee it being strictly a tool for the accumulation of wealth and power. And so I was concerned there. And then secondly, I was concerned with the everyday user's complicity in this culture of mutual and total surveillance that we live in now. And I think that surprised me to see how comfortable the average person was with surveillance, surveilling your family, surveilling your children, being surveilled, having the government have access to so much of your, private information, sharing so much willingly, being comfortable with, video surveillance, digital surveillance, corporate surveillance, government surveillance. It's gone, I thought, so many steps along the way there would be total global outrage, but none of that has materialized. And so it was very startling to see that we lived in a panopticon of our own making, and that everybody was kind of relatively comfortable with it. We're happy to have this surveillance in exchange for free things and free access and some of these. But so I think that those aspects started formulating, and I thought, well, maybe, but there's so many people, brilliant people that talk about these issues, but there hadn't really been, I think, a novel that had talked about that slow entry point, maybe from young person, May Holland, who enters this company, that with all the, utopian hopes and feeling like she's at the center of everything, and then slowly realizing the price of so much of this technology and what is lost, and all of the what makes us human, all of these things that are lost when we submit to this the
robotic overlords.
I think that I always think that we are so complicit.
Exactly. It's not the other, right? It's us.
I never think we do live it with these monopolies, but at the same time, we don't have to. We do always have choices, we're working on Zoom right now, and everyone in the world works on Zoom, but we have accepted this as a matter of sort of the
Right.
lifeblood of current communication without questioning, do we have other options? Is
Yes.
this the only thing? Do we all have to overnight become, subjugate ourselves to one company and one system of communication? And I feel like I've been startled again and again at how quickly we all accept, oh, from now on, we're going to do it this way. And we're going to give all of our or money or personal information to this one company simply because they're asking for it. So I've been a little bit sometimes surprised and depressed at how complicit we are and how sort of conformist I think we've become with some of these tools.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a very similar experience. I know when I returned from overseas to India, and I found that they were rolling out this biometric identity project. Gandhi became a human rights activist and someone, you know, who embarked on civil disobedience in response to having to have an identity card in South Africa.
Yeah.
And I thought, wait, now it's okay because it's our own identity card for Indians by Indians, not by a colonial power. So that makes it okay. And I expected that everybody would be on this street burning these things down and refusing to use them. And, you know, we'd have like an independence movement all over again. And everyone's exactly as you're saying, complicit. It's a trade-off. It's convenient. You know, I have nothing to hide. I have nothing to fear.
Right.
So they know my Netflix viewing history. So what, right?
Yeah.
Like and I mean, I'm a privacy lawyer, so I think in terms of harms, but I think for the average person, it's so difficult to articulate and even visualize the many, many, many ways in which harms can occur.
Well, tell me, as an
right?
attorney, how
Yes.
would you, as an attorney, if you were telling your client why you should not give up all of your personal data, what kinds of arguments would you make?
Well, I think one of the things I always tell people is that the road to privacy hell is paved with balancing metaphors. Like if I never heard another balancing metaphor again, I would be very happy. But I think you can scream law and policy and rights and, you know, human rights, and people just don't care. But the second you talk about price, people wake up. If I tell someone, how much did you pay for those jeans? And I say, you realize someone in a different zip code paid $50 less. And they go, that's got to be unconstitutional. There must be a law against it. And I go, now you care. Now you care that, you know, the data reveals something about your ability to pay. Now you care about your rights because there's money involved, but you don't care about the principle. And I think that's a real shame, right?
We've been softened up over the last 3 or 4 decades because this came in little, it came in small increments by degrees. I think the very first time I felt very, first very startled was when Gmail introduced a free email service. Before that, there had been AOL for which you paid.
Yes.
And so you would pay $20 a month. And that was like, okay, I have a
and
service.
They would send you a CD and
send you the CD and the dial up, and you have that. And that seemed to me a relatively honest transaction, even though AOL had problems in a lot of ways. So then Gmail introduces a free email.
Yes.
All we have to do is accept that bots or some sort of software is reading your email, looking for keywords, and then sending those to, you know, marketing firms and such to say, well, this person's interested in rock climbing, so we're going to send them rock climbing ads on the side of their mail. And I thought, again, that would be so outrageous. Whether or not they know for sure that there's no humans reading your emails, who knows? We were not told. But the fact that we're okay with our private messages being read in order to sell us stuff, in any other decade or century, it would seem like beyond anybody's ability to tolerate. but that
Yeah.
was tolerated, and hundreds of millions of people use Gmail. And I thought, okay, the species has changed pretty drastically, very quickly, to
Yeah.
be okay with that. And what is it that sort of what preceded that? What kinds of small steps preceded that we could be comfortable with that? And so it's still a little bit mysterious to me, but I think at this point, because there isn't so much the canary in a coal mine kind of that we can point to, like,
Yeah.
here's the bad result of having your biometric data known by your government. Here's what can happen.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have those
Yeah.
case studies
Yeah.
that are so dramatic and drastic quite yet in democracies. But
Yeah.
authoritarian governments and totalitarian societies, there are many examples of people being identified and tracked through their social media posts. These governments will use and have vast teams of people searching and watching all of this activity online to find and identify dissenters and search them out and punish them. But it's I don't know. I am of the belief, and this was expressed in the Every Delaney
Yes.
Wells protagonist keeps coming up with software that's ever more invasive and absurd, just to see if anybody will rebel. And she
Yes.
continues to find that no one will. And
I was going to say exactly that she comes up with creepier and creepier things, waiting for people to finally, like, that's the tipping point, and that tipping point is never reached.
I think it's and there's the aspect of I'm interested in not just sort of like what surveillance means from a corporate and government standpoint, but how we as humans, why we're so comfortable with not just surveillance, but also the illusion of control and certainty and order that comes with many of these things. And so one of the Delaney's programs tells you whether or not your friends are worthy. And anyone I pitch this to, it's always about 49 to 51. It's like really on the bubble in terms of how people feel like if they would use it, if you could tell from your friends' behavior, you and I looking at each other, the software basically analyzes your facial movements, your tone of voice, your biometrics to say, is this person telling me the truth? Is she trustworthy? Is she a true friend? And I think that if this were introduced tomorrow, I think it would be wildly popular. Because in a world of uncertainty and people not trusting their own sort of gut, the algorithm tells me that this is a good friend. It provides one solid answer in a world of unknowns.
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say that I think what's really, really interesting here is that you would suggest this to people and they would think, well, that's really egregious. And then they would tweet about this and write about it on Instagram and say, oh my God, I read The Circle and this was so creepy. I'm going to switch off everything. And they're saying this on all of the apps that does this to them, right? Like,
I know. I mean, I think that's an upsetting complicity that it's tough because I think everybody knows of all of the crimes of Facebook in particular and the way that they've sort of tried to profit from hate. They've tried to profit from exploiting the fears and insecurities of young people, especially. They've done incredible damage to 2 generations of young women in particular. I have teenagers at home and they would never use Facebook, but they use Instagram. And I think that the fact that we know this, everybody has read these abuses day after day, year after year, going on 18 years or so now. And yet people will still post their family photos using these platforms and they'll and use them. And I think one thing is that we don't quite yet have a viable alternative to some of these that, are scaled, the way that Instagram is scaled right now. But I do think in most cases we do have choices, and there isn't anybody under 30 that uses Facebook. And so they've chosen against Facebook mostly because it feels like their grandparents'
Are
platform.
there?
They would never use it because it's so
Yes.
uncool. But then they will use Instagram. Instagram will be replaced within the next 5 years. It's just a
Yeah.
question what replaces it, and then does Facebook buy that next platform because to keep up and to keep moving to where the users are. But I think that we do have such power. It's just to show that how quickly Facebook became uncool and obsolete.
Mhm.
Young people especially have the power to say, this is not okay. We're not going to give you our time, money, data. We're
Yeah.
not going to empower an exploitive and inherently and egregiously harmful platform that doesn't seem to care about rights, information, truth, their complicity in the spread of disinformation during COVID, on and on, their complicity in the spread of hate and the rise of Trump and illiberalism here and across the world, all of these things that they've done. And yet still people will use Instagram, and even though they know it's the same company that's profiting. And I just wish that we would always exercise our power and choose against these companies that showed no remorse and no interest in human rights. Anyway.
I remember when I was reading the Every, I was trying to imagine what a Nevery would look like.
Yeah.
What would be the absolute opposite of that kind of a behemoth? And
Yeah.
I wonder if you could speak to sort of what your idea of what's an alternative universe where this isn't the business model and this isn't how we lose our agency. Like, what would be a replacement?
I think it's so simple. Instagram is very basic software, for example. Like when I have a lot of friends that are engineers and tech folks here, and I've been here 32 years. So you get to know a lot of people that have started a lot of companies, and they all say how basic it is. It's basic software. Was the company when it existed before it was bought was like 8 people. It was a tiny little company. And so you could replace Instagram quite easily. I think, and move everybody over there, and then you'd have to build out the back end. But I think that there's a nonprofit model in this sort of realm of Wikipedia and other sort of, mutually owned kind of nonprofit entities that people would, if they would just have to be started, and then somebody would work on the scale. But I think everybody would migrate over there if given that choice. And I think that my publishing company is a nonprofit. I think a lot of cultural entities in the US are moving to the nonprofit model because it offers, infinite advantages, especially if you're not in it to sell yourself or sell the company to a bigger entity at some point and cash out, but just to sort of provide a meeting place and a safe place.
In the public sphere.
Interest in hard tech. So if you just wanted a place where you post photos of your pets or whatever, like without all of the complicity and all of the ethical problems, I think I urge somebody out there, I'm not an engineer, but somebody to do it, and just to make it a little bit cooler than Instagram, and everyone would move over there and be in a whole different realm.
I think the cool thing is one where I think, civil society and academia are slowly cottoning on to the idea that you need to go viral and you need to have memes to make privacy cool again. One of my friends, Julian York, at one of these DEF CON conferences once said, like, you wouldn't have sex without a condom. Why would you communicate with someone without encryption? Right. And that's a very striking thing to remember about, digital safety. And I think there is a lot of work there. And that's why I think fiction is so useful, because not everyone is listening to what the EFF is doing or what the ACLU is fighting, and not everyone's going to watch litigation. But I think fiction is a very good gateway drug to get people to think about things that they're either complicit in, they never really realized what they were complicit in, why it was problematic. And I wonder, given that a lot of the audience for this will be in India and in Asia, have you had a different reception to these ideas in countries outside of the US? Do people think, you know, human rights or privacy are like very American Western constructs and they don't apply elsewhere?
No, I think it's very similar. Especially younger readers who have grown up with the same platforms, you know.
Yeah.
I have friends in Saudi Arabia and friends in Egypt and friends in Syria and a lot of countries that have had sort of, you know, where civil society suffers under the and struggles to exist. And but they also have had internet access for the last, you know, I was in Saudi before there was widespread internet access, and it was very different than it is now. And so, but I think that they have the same concerns, and it's very urgent for the average, you know, 24-year-old that has access and is knows what can happen with these tools if used by an authoritarian government. But at the same time, it's very difficult for them to build alternative platforms and alternative pathways. But, you know, I think that so much of the problem is the convenience of the behemoths. They do have a knack for making these platforms so easily accessible. One click. The convenience is extraordinary. You know, when you talk about, we haven't talked about Amazon, and I don't know if Amazon is a big presence in India, is it?
Huge, yeah.
Oh, you know, when you can buy anything that exists in the world with one click, that convenience is so overpowering that it's very difficult to instead get in a car, get on a bus or a subway, go across town to get the, you know, some device or a power cord or anything like that you could just get delivered to your door, usually by first thing in the morning. But every time you are clicking on that button, you are empowering a monopoly that, again, is known for paying its workers poorly, treating them poorly, hollowing out the middle class, hollowing out
mom and pop shops, the high street,
shops,
independent bookstores.
Independent bookstores, especially, and really being you know, harming the publishing industry in uncountable ways. And we know all of that too, you know, and yet the convenience is so great that we sort of, you know, we swallow our, I don't know, we tamp down our conscience for a minute and push that button. And I think the convenience in a world that's infinitely getting more complex every day, and everybody, I feel, is so overwhelmed every day. They don't necessarily have all that time to do the right thing. And maybe they're trying to move from a meat diet to a vegan diet, and that's where they're putting their sort of attention and sort of acting on their conscience, but they can't also fight Amazon at the same time. So I understand that it is exhausting to fight and to, you know, fight all these different monopolies. But even if we do it a little bit, you know,
like with climate, right?
Exactly. Just do a little bit.
It is a collective good problem, right?
I think so. And I think that, you know, if we see the result here in San Francisco between COVID and Amazon, you know, I think every third storefront is empty at this point. You just see these businesses going belly up overnight, and people think, well, what happened? Well, what happened was all of those blue buttons that you pushed meant that they're not selling, they can't sell their candles or their t-shirts or their shoes, whatever it is. And so you have these empty streets and this sort of wasteland of, you know, town squares in urban America. And so I don't know, maybe at some point we'll see the cause and effect and sort of make active choices. And I know that everyone tries to do it when they can. It's just, we just actually have to try a little bit more. And I think we're in this stage of the world. Let me try out this metaphor for you.
Okay.
You know, we're in a sort of a foodie haven here.
Yeah.
When I was growing up in Chicago, 70s and 80s, it was that processed food era of the world,
Yeah.
especially in the US. Everything came out of a can. I never saw a fresh vegetable until I was in my,
California.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so everything was that sort of high fructose corn syrup era, where
The Velveeta era.
Velveeta era, and everything was processed and mass manufactured, and that was considered progress in a way, like we're this
Exactly.
advanced society. Um, and that's, I think, where we are when it comes to technology and monopolies and everything, is that we're at that stage where everybody's using these mass manufactured means of communication, of accessing things, and technology is just is that high fructose corn syrup that has to go into everything we do, whether
the empty snacks, the empty calories.
Empty calories. And it's
Yeah.
like, you know, any workplace, everybody's like, well, we have to use Zoom, we have to use Slack, we have to use whatever. But these are all, to some extent, high fructose corn syrup solutions to things.
Yes,
We have to
yes.
think about the artisanal, organic solutions. In the educational realm, I don't know, it's probably the same way everywhere, but during COVID, so much of education had to go online,
Yeah.
had to be digital in nature. And that was just, you know, it had to be that way. But now I'm finding, and I'm seeing in a lot of the educational worlds that I work in,
Yeah.
that it's still that way, that we haven't gone back to in person, reading on paper, doing work on paper. You know, so much of it is still all digital. And I see kids having to do all of their work from morning to night on a screen.
Yeah.
And why that is, you know, it was, maybe it's more convenient. Maybe you can, you know, all the digitization of it makes it a little bit easier sometimes for educators to have everything in one place. But the end result is that the average 13-year-old is on a screen from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they don't have the option of logging off, because all of their work is on that screen.
Yeah.
And again, high fructose corn syrup solution. It is, we know it's bad for you. Every doctor and psychologist would say that much is way too much screen time.
Yes.
And it's seen as the future. It's seen as the most efficient. It's seen as, well, they're going to be on screens anyway, whatever it is. But
yeah. And it's for their own good, right? We get to, I mean, yeah.
But everybody has to make these choices, you know,
Yes.
every time. You're in the same way, because I think everyone really, we've become, as a world, as a species, we've become so conscious to how the difference that food makes, good food, fresh food everywhere. And I love that that's happened in the last 20 years. We need to think that way when it comes to our use of the digital world too, that it's not always the solution, that we need a experience, right?
And I think that's a great metaphor also, because I think in a lot of developing economies like India and elsewhere, a lot of people would say just food would be fine. Whether it's good, bad, ugly is kind of next level. And I think on that Maslow's hierarchy of, do you want something, benefits, welfare, you know, in exchange for this horrible biometric identity card that's your entry point to having benefits? Are you going to trade privacy for it? Like, sure, if it's going to feed my family, take my data, take everything you want, right? So I think that balance is struck at a very, very different point with vulnerable people. And I think it's also interesting that the two industries that use the term users are the tech industry and the drug industry, both of which talk about it, are like implicit in addiction, right? So
yeah,
you don't hear people think other than consumers or, you know.
Have you read Kathy O'Neill's Weapons of Mass
Destruction?
Yeah.
Yes.
she's brilliant on this topic of how this sort of the sort of numerification of humans
Yeah,
affects especially people that are the most vulnerable and least powerful in societies.
and the
And
sort of
here,
shame economy, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
do you have credit scores the same way we do here? Like to
No, and
buy
actually this ID card was meant as a way to compensate for the lack of credit scoring. Same as with, the Chinese social credit system, where it's seen as a solution to a perceived gap.
And so what's collected on this biometric card?
Irises,
Yeah,
fingerprints, date of birth, place of birth, like a few data fields. But I
Okay.
think more than what's collected, it's, unlike the social security number, which has so many safeguards against, what can happen, who can use it, who can
Right.
query it. Like there are always rules around that. This is the equivalent, but it's literally being used for Amazon deliveries
Oh, no.
to make sure it's really the person who, signing for stuff. So the proliferation and, how ubiquitous it's become, in a way that the social security number never became, and isn't allowed to by law. I think that's the problem we see in a lot of Asian countries where they don't see the harm in, this one ID being used for everything, to a point where identity theft is a huge thing, where, there's so many ways in which it's abused.
Well, right. And I think that we're also think sometimes that these tools make us safer
yeah.
from fraud or whatever. And so this is where the surveillance culture comes into the US.
Yeah.
We have what are called ring cameras that are on every
right.
door. And no matter where you live out in the country, you still have a ring camera. It makes no sense for most people.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Police are very interested in these, and a lot of times they will subsidize the buying of ring cameras for communities. And the trade-off is that they have access to that footage. In the US, my prediction, and tell me what you think as a privacy attorney, I think in 15 years, there will be cameras in the homes that are more or less required, because most crimes in the US, especially domestic violence and such, are committed in the home.
Yeah.
So how do you argue against cameras in the home if they would make people safer?
Yeah.
It's very hard to argue against that, to say, well, child abuse, domestic abuse, all of these things will be mitigated or even prevented, thwarted, if there are cameras in each room, to say, and again, if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem?
Despite the data showing that it doesn't work, right?
It provides this illusion of safety. You will be these always these videos that you'll see online of like a crime that was thwarted or somebody caught because it was caught on camera.
Right.
I think that because there has been no resistance to cameras in any aspect of society, there won't be a resistance when they come into the home and are required to. That's my greatest fear here, especially because I think we're probably the world capital of self-surveillance right now.
Yeah.
I think it's spreading. And anything that makes us feel a little safer and a little bit more certain will be adopted. So whether it's
performative, right? It's security theater, even if it doesn't actually work. It's kind of with the shoes at the TSA, right? Like a whole.
We did have
being pushed to do Q&A. Yeah, we did.
Oh, yeah.
So I have a bunch of questions that people have thrown out for you. And I think something you just said is actually links very well to one of them, where someone said, as a writer, you seem to be a pessimist. This is Anisha Chalani. As a writer, you seem to be a pessimist about the future of global capitalism and monopolies. But in your other work, you seem to exude optimism and hope as you invest in concrete ways to make society better. How do you manage this contradiction?
Well, I think that the work, if you wanted to be an optimist, you go into a school in any given day and you work one-on-one with young people, or you see what teachers are doing in the classroom, or that's what our Center 826 Valencia here in San Francisco does every day. if you ever wanted to believe in good in the world, you go into that center after school and you see 30 volunteers working with 40 kids, and it's the sweetest, happiest place on earth. And there's always so much good being done on the local, on the ground, person to person, shoulder to shoulder sort of level. I love that part of the world, you know, and sort of human interaction.
Yeah.
I really chafe against giant companies, the dehumanization of that, of systems. I think what my work is pessimistic. It's the effect that systems can have on grinding down individuality and grinding down human agency and grinding down hope. And anytime, and like I wrote a book called The Hologram for the King, and in it, the protagonist is almost ruined by his credit score because he signed up for a Banana Republic credit card like years ago. This happens every day. I was talking to a friend the other day who has no credit. He can't get an apartment. He can't get a car. He doesn't exist. He's subhuman here. Because these three agencies that are beholden to no one, they are accountable to no one. They're private companies. We have no way to influence.
No transparency,
No transparency, no government oversight, nothing. But they determine with three digits whether you are a viable member of society and can access basic human things. But this is, again, a system that everybody is quite okay with. As it ruins lives every day.
So here's another question from Clarence D'Souza, which is, do you think the world has become so dystopian that it's difficult to write satire? Because by the time you've written it, the real world has already caught up with it.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
The simple answer is yes. It's really hard because there's a metric that Delaney Wells comes up with that determines whether or not someone's beautiful. And that becomes another wildly popular app. So I wrote that book, it was published, and 2 weeks later, a friend of mine said that they were at a restaurant and they overheard 4 tech sort of titans talk about a program that would do exactly that, and that it was like in the middle of development. And I thought, okay, I can only get 2 weeks ahead now of the future.
And you're sitting there going, this wasn't meant to be an instruction manual.
I know, but I feel like, but that's our need for certainty. And if you say, am I beautiful? Am I good? I don't know. Who's going to tell me? I don't want to wait for the afterlife. Can't somehow
validation now.
Tell me now.
Yes.
Am I valid? And that's why I think that these systems and these numerical designations are popular, even as they are unfair, even as they are dehumanizing people. That level of certainty that you sort of get is, I guess, something that's gratifying to a lot of people.
And I know you've spoken about this in sport as well, in other interviews where you've said how the sort of robot umpire and referee is,
Well, not just that. In culture, we determine whether a movie is good because it's got an 88%. Record albums are 7.2. Like, think about the absurdity of assigning not even a number, but
a very precise number with decimal points.
What kind of lunacy where you think, oh yeah, but there's that comfort level where you can say, good, okay, the Exile on Main Street is an 8.6. I got it, moving on. And you feel like you've learned something, and you feel like that's taken care of, as opposed to it being totally undeterminable. It's, we have to accept nuance, mystery, the inability of numbers to ever define human experience. It will never be doable. Everything is illusory. Every time you see a number attached to culture, a human being, anything, it is totally false. It is completely illusory, and it must be resisted every time.
Data can tell any story you want it to, is what I always tell my students.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you can stitch together any number.
Yeah, and more often than not, numbers do lie. They are a little bit of our understanding of something. Whether,
Yeah,
but if you're talking about calculating the trajectory of a space capsule to the moon, great. Put all your numbers in there; they rule.
give it to NASA. Yeah,
Yeah, when it comes to like all of these mysterious, nuance-filled things like art and music and culture and human beings and beauty and all of these things, leave the numbers out. They have no role. They're never, it's absurd to have them enter it and keep these things separate, like, but
yeah.
unfortunately, we just keep merging the two, and the numbers are overtaking every part of our experience. We have to push back.
I think it's like what you have Delaney say in the Every, that subjectivity is just objectivity waiting for the data.
Yeah. Oh my God. I wrote that, and then that got out as a meme, I guess, people
Oh,
thinking I meant it. So
no.
isn't that funny?
Jonathan
Yeah.
Swift is turning over in his grave by the
That's,
end of satire.
yeah, that is the philosophy in around here for sure, is that everything can be defined, everything can be known if just we get all of the data. And I hear that every day. It's in the wind around here every minute of every day.
Talking about numbers, I think these guys have been telling me we have 2 minutes left for the last 5 minutes. So
Okay.
yeah, it's been so good talking to you. I could do this all day, even with my arm in a sling.
Yeah, I hope you get better soon.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. And thank you for taking the time to talk to
Thank
us.
you for all of your time preparing and
course.
being such a great moderator. I hope we see each other in person one of these days.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Eggers and Mrs. Jayaram, for that amazingly eye-opening conversation. And a huge thanks to you, our ever-dedicated audience, for joining us online today. Our next session online is at 8 p.m. called Unbelonging, Perpetual Strangers in a New Land, where Dina Nairi is in conversation with Dr. Nader Fakhri. And for those of you in and around Mumbai, remember you can join us for the opening of our offline festival on ground starting tomorrow on Friday, November 11th at the NCPA, and then additionally on Saturday, November 12th and Sunday, November 13th at the St. Paul's Institute and the Tidal Waves bookstore through the weekend, featuring writers and ideologues such as Arjun Gain, Manu Pillai, Mamang Dai, Geeta Ramaswamy, Sejal Mehta, and Naushad Forbes, amongst a treasure trove of others. Remember to check out our website, tatalitlive.in, for the full schedule of sessions and speakers. Thanks to our title sponsor, Tata. Tata Literature Live 2022 is in association with the NCPA, co-sponsored by Tata Steel and Titan, powered by Godrej and Kotak. This session was sponsored by Kotak. The festival's social media handle is @TataLitLive across all networks. And that concludes our online session for today. But continue logging on to Tata Literature Live 2022, where you can enjoy turning the page. Happy reading and good night.